Divers, Alec, Peirce, Vintage Scuba. Now, the title, Fix Your Own Beaver Tail. What do we call it? Fixing Your Beaver Tail. Fixing your beaver tail. For a lot of you divers, you're going to say, what the heck is that? You don't even know what a beaver tail is. Well, a beaver tail is the back portion of a furry little animal that we have here in Canada. No, no, I'm kidding. A beaver tail is actually a scuba item. Now, it may not be, I don't know what they call it now. I don't even know if they still have beaver tails. I don't think so. Most wetsuits, yeah, we're talking about wetsuits. Most wetsuits now are one-piece suits. You know, like sleepers, kids' sleepers. You climb in, put your feet in, you put your arms in, and zip it up. And they're fantastic. They keep the water out, to keep arms out. But for many, many, many years, wetsuits were made in two pieces. Yeah, you had a pants. The original pants were called high waist. They come up to here. Later versions come up over your shoulders. They were called Farmer John. Now, maybe some of these names, now you're starting to recognize what we're talking about. Certainly you old guys do. The jacket was an interesting affair. The first jackets were used a beaver tail. Yeah, the beaver tail, so the jacket went on like a shirt, just like this shirt, long sleeves, light shirt. But it had an extension. Kevin's going to show you some pictures. It had an extension on the back that hung down about that part. And you had to, after you got the pants on and you put your jacket on to zip it up, then you reach down, pull the extension down, reach between your legs, and you pull that extension up in front, like this. This kept the jacket down and also enclosed everything nice and snugly around your body. You pull it up in front. Now, after you pull it up in front, you have to hold it there somehow. Today, they use Velcro. At least in the 80s and 90s, the last time I was selling wetsuits, they used Velcro. But they didn't have Velcro in the 60s and 50s and 60s. So we used what were called twist locks. Twist locks, L-O-C-S. Couldn't spell back then. They were called twist locks. And so you would take your beaver tail, bring it up in front, and then you had to put a twist lock and twist it. It looked like this. So on the beaver tail itself, there was this thing. No, on the way around. This thing. It was just both sides, inside and the outside. So you pull the beaver down, this is what you'd see, like this. And then on the bottom of the jacket, on each side of the jacket, the bottom of the jacket, on the zipper, you'd have one of these things. This is the actual twist lock. So you pull the beaver tail up in front, and then you put the tail, the beaver tail, over top of the twist lock like so, and then twist it, which locked it in place. Really not complicated. But maybe the terminology threw you off a little bit. So this is called a twist lock from a beaver tail. All right? Whoop-de-doo. Number one, I don't even know if they make wetsuits with beaver tails anymore. I'm not too sure. Two-piece suits, there must be some way of holding that jacket down, Kevin, so they probably do. I don't know if they still make two-piece suits, no? So anyway, and the last one's an over Velcro. But I do know that a lot of divers still use older wetsuits. Now, whether they're using an older wetsuit that they've had since they were 16 years old for 40 years, I doubt it. Not too many divers in their 60s and 70s can still get into the wetsuit they had when they were 15 or 16. I'm the exception. Kevin would have a problem anyway. But there are divers who are still using an old wetsuit with a beaver tail, and that beaver tail might actually have twist locks. Now, in addition to that, for vintage events, and we go to a lot of vintage events. I have a very large vintage group. There is a very large vintage group. A lot of them are friends of mine, and we go to different events. Sometimes they're sea hunt events. That is, sea hunt is the main reason for the event. Other times they're just vintage events. And they range all the way from, gosh, Minnesota down through Wisconsin, Illinois, Ohio, all over. Florida, very, very popular in Florida. Other places as well. So a bunch of vintage divers will get together and they'll have a vintage diving event. Yeah, exactly. And the vintage diving event, its very name tells you what it is, but it is characterized by the fact that the divers all wear vintage gear. Vintage gear, generally speaking, there are different definitions. I mean, anything that's old is old. But generally, vintage gear means it was made before 1975, which means it was made pretty much in the 60s. And if it was made in the 60s, if it was a wetsuit made in the 60s, it had two pieces, and it had a beaver tail on the jacket, and the beaver tail was almost invariably held together by twist locks. Now, these are not made anymore. Well, I suppose there might be a source of them, but I don't know of a source. I happen to have quite a bunch of them, all the different pieces. The reason I have them is because another dear friend of mine from California used to have a wetsuit factory. And quite some time ago, several years ago, I was there and she said, here, you take these with you. And she gave me a box with a bunch of these in it. Now, they've proven very valuable. As I mentioned, a lot of my friends are vintage divers and their suits either needed to have the twist locks replaced, or in some case they had a not quite so vintage suit in order to make it more vintage. You catch what I'm saying here? Make it more vintage. They would take off the modern beaver tail attachment, usually Velcro, and replace it with beaver tails. So there's a variety of reasons, 2 or 3 reasons why these devices have been popular. And what I wanted to show you today is just very simply how to do that. It's not a complicated process. You need to have the necessary components. And the necessary components are obviously a twist lock. Looks like that. That's this portion. Twist lock. Now the twist lock is held in place by a washer with a hole in the back. The twist lock goes through the washer, over the suit's in there, over that. And then using a large punch will do it. There is actually a proper tool, which I don't have in front of me right now. There is a proper tool, but any large punch, you would then punch this area here, and it spreads it open and catches on the washer and holds the twist lock in place. Now, it's not quite that simple, because in order to make these things strong, don't forget the vintage suits are made of rubber, which tears. They almost invariably, I don't know if you can see that, Kevin, can you see that round ring on there? A round piece of material. And the same on here, that's a piece of material that's glued to the rubber to reinforce it. It's a piece of nylon, so you have to have these as well. A bunch of these, you see. So now, let's do that again. On the outside, you would glue this to the outside of the suit, glue one to the inside of the suit, obviously with the holes matching up. So one on the outside, one on the inside, and the hole you can see through. And then you would take this device, push it through the hole, like so, through the rubber, through the other hole, and then, I'll put this on as well, just so you can see exactly what it's like, through the other one on the other side, and then you put this on, squeeze the whole thing together, compress the rubber, and then seal it. And that's where the problem came in. Because the rubber is 1/4 of an inch thick, it had to be compressed. You see there's not an awful lot of room in there. So what they used to do at wetsuit factories, and what you can do yourself, is to make a little tool like this. And it's a very simple tool. I've advised some of the fellows that I've sold these to simply make it out of a piece of 2x4. You can just drill a hole that is the appropriate size so that this, the twist lock itself, fits down in there and stops. You see that? And then you put all your material together. You put on your rubber, and then you put your washer on top of that. And somewhere here I have a washer. There it is. Put the washer on top of that. Now the tricky part is to get that all compressed down. Well, that can be done a variety of ways using a socket wrench. You can squeeze it down. There's a variety of ways to squeeze that down so that now the rubber is compressed, and now you can spread that part there, and when you pull it off, it'll look like this. It's not all that difficult. Now, the other part is actually simpler. The other piece that the twist lock goes through, this piece, which is on the beaver tail itself, I can't remember which is which. I think the twist lock is on the beaver tail. It is, because the beaver tail goes underneath the suit. This is on the suit. Beaver tail goes underneath. They stick through, and then you twist the twist lock. Yeah, you guys, you vintage guys out there listening to this, any of my friends, you're going to laugh at me because I can't remember. It's been a long time since I put on a twist lock beaver tail. Well, actually, not that long. But anyway, this is the other part. It's even simpler. It has 2 parts only, like this. This is the outside, the part that you see. And then behind that, on the inside, is this little washer, obviously shaped the same. So these 2 parts go together. I'll just put them together. You'll see the points on there. Are you watching this, kid? Can you see that? It goes in there with the rubber in between. You just bend these over, bend them over. So on the back, it looks like this. I make it sound easy. It's not easy. Because once again, you have to compress that rubber. You have to squeeze it down tightly enough that these little points will stick up past the washer so you can bend them over. There's little tools for that too. Now, the wonderful lady, my friend in California, who did this for a living, she made up just the simplest little tool that you can think of. This is really a nut in the correct shape. Did you remember the correct shape, Kevin? This is a nut. It's actually a threaded hole. By the correct shape, I mean it fits over there like that, you see. So she made up this threaded, I'm going to call it a nut because that's really what it is. And then what you would do is you would assemble the parts like so, put that nut on the back side like so, okay, a little wash on the front, and put a bolt, the appropriate bolt that fits the threads through the whole assembly, and then using a small wrench, you could tighten that up. And as you tighten that up, tighter and tighter, you pulled that nut in until after a few seconds, the rubber was compressed. And now you can see the rubber is compressed enough. Can you see one of those points there, Kevin? I'm not too sure. You can see that the rubber is compressed enough now that I can easily reach in there with a tool, small punch or something, bend that tab over. That grabs the washer. I'll take the nut out, and you have a perfectly made female portion of your twist lock. So there you go, guys. It's just that simple. Okay, beaver tail, twist locks, and a couple ideas on how to install them. There are actually small proper tools. I have the proper tools. I didn't bring them in with me today. And little instructions come with them, and it shows you the little punch, other things. The only thing that is not in the proper tools is how to compress this female portion of the twist lock. This idea that Dottie had to do that is just so simple and so ingenious. I think it's amazing. I love this. But anyway, there you go, guys. Beaver tails, twist locks, and how to replace them. So if you have an old wetsuit starting to show its age, or you're trying to make a real, genuine vintage wetsuit for a vintage event or sea hunt, give me a call. I have these bits and pieces, and now you have an idea how they all go together. Okay, hope there was something in there for you. Talk to you soon. Alec, Peirce, Vintage Scuba.